Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. It is Friday, May 29th, 2026. I'm Carlene Johnson, the Center Square's state government reporter. And in today's episode, an update on the devastating situation in Longview, where we had recovery operations continuing. Many of the victims killed in the incident at the pulp and paper mill in Longview, the Nippon facility. Their bodies have been recovered. Still 3 people missing and presumed dead, but we have a death toll at 11 now and still many people in the hospital with burns. A quick update on that just ahead. And that is Washington's Department of Children, Youth, and Families Secretary Tana Senn battles allegations of fraud within the agency having to do with daycare center fraud, which we've talked a lot about. We've also learned that a whistleblower directly told her last year about some theft going on at the Glen facility. My colleagues TJ Martinell and Tim Klauser with that story. The Washington Coalition for Open Government is out with a new winners and sinners list when it comes to response times for public records requests. And then comments from a member of the Seattle City Council this week who is very concerned about security with the upcoming World Cup in Seattle. And she wants Mayor Katie, or rather, he wants Mayor Katie Wilson to turn those security cameras back on right away. Now let's dive into today's episode. Recovery operations continue in Longview following Tuesday's disaster with that vat of chemicals at the Nippon pulp and paper mill. Officials said during Thursday's news briefing, an update on it, that 6 of the 9 missing workers have now been recovered and confirmed dead after that chemical implosion or collapse of this large vat. The 3 other workers are still missing and presumed dead. Still several people in the hospital, some of them with very serious chemical burns. The implosion or explosion or collapse of this vat, we're still hearing it called all kinds of different things. Regardless, we had hundreds of thousands of gallons spilled out, and there was obviously some sort of an explosion as a result of that collapse. You've seen images of the damaged vehicles in the area. Still lots of questions. And I caught up again late yesterday with Senator Jeff Wilson. That is his district in Longview. His son actually works at the plant, was not injured, and he just still has so many questions about what happened.
You can see that this was a sudden impact, and at times that hurts to talk about it because you want to personify about those workers. Did they have a chance? Did they not? Training or no training. They were very well trained people. They're very professional there. But how do you train not for a worst case discharge, but a worst case scenario? I have never seen a tank of that size fail like that. Now, when I mean failure, we know it's a tank failure, but we don't know whether it ruptured, whether it was structural. I doubt it was something with the contents of the white liquor. I'm more concerned about, you could see that when the tank leaned, for whatever reason, it sent a wall of liquid towards people. And that's what hurts.
And you can bet the lawsuits are coming probably within a matter of days. I wouldn't be surprised. Como News actually was reporting today that the wife of one of the confirmed dead victims said her husband had been talking about unsafe conditions at the plant. And there's a Seattle-based law firm that's already stepped up and said they're ready to represent any of the victim families and get to the bottom of this. And the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board has opened a formal investigation into what happened at that plant. Now, as Washington Department of Children, Youth, and Families, DCYF Secretary Tana Senn battles allegations of fraud in her agency and reports that we've been covering extensively for months here at the Center Square, Washington, we've learned that a whistleblower directly told her last year about major theft going on at the Glen facility. My colleagues TJ Martinell and Tim Klauser have that story.
Welcome to another episode of Washington in Focus. I'm your host, Tim Klauser, with the Center Square's Washington State investigative reporter, TJ Martinell, here to talk about some more public records that TJ recently got. This time about a whistleblower making claims about alleged theft happening at the Echo Glen Juvenile Rehabilitation Center in Snoqualmie, Washington. TJ, why don't you run us through the records that you've got and what DCYF is or isn't saying in response to these?
Yeah, so I got these records. It was text messages between a whistleblower and Secretary Senn herself. So he was directly communicating with her, and he is saying, "Hey, there's major theft issues going on in this facility. I want to talk to you about it." And they ended up actually meeting twice, and he didn't really go into details in the text messages itself about what was going on. It was kept, I think intentionally vague and not going into too many details in a text message. But I did reach out to DCYF to ask them what that was about. And they, I didn't go into details in my emails because, part of the whole thing we were trying to do is protect the whistleblowers, from retaliation. And they really didn't want to comment. And I also have heard nothing from them since the story came out. So I didn't get a phone call or an email saying, "Hey, we saw your story. Just, let you know, we looked into it and we didn't find anything going on," or something along those lines. Right. And it's not like it's not like the mafia where there's a buffer between the Don and the person on the ground, right? The button man who pushes the button. This is a whistleblower going directly to the top person in the state agency saying this is going on. And she's like, "Yes, I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say." So it's not like she can claim ignorance about this, whatever's going on, or if anything's going on at all. And I reached out to the state auditor's office and they said that they'd heard nothing, that they were doing no investigations. And then it was interesting. I asked DSHS's fraud division, "Is this something you guys would look into?" They said no, because apparently theft isn't fraud. Um, I'm, which is interesting, but yeah, that's pretty much what's going on right now. It's one of the things I find fascinating about this facility is it is mixed. It's a it allows boys and girls, but it also allows women. So it allows men up to 18 years old, but it allows women in there up to 25, which I thought was interesting. Why would you not just cut it off at 18 as well? But the other thing that I found interesting about this facility is there is no, they're building a fence right now, but historically it had no fence. So,
And we have seen recent escapes there from inmates.
yeah, which is not hard when there's no fence. I mean, ask East Germany before they put up the wall, right? There's a reason why they put up walls. It's to keep people in or keep people out. In this case, it's you build a wall to keep people in. The other thing that's interesting is they talk about how they've had a lot of staff turnover and retention issues because, there's not enough staff there. So they're working overtime and then they live a long ways away because of the cost of living. This facility is located in Snoqualmie, which, 50 years ago was kind of a, podunk area, rural area, but now it's like every part of Western Washington, like a shack costs $1 million or something like that. So it's a high cost of living. So you got to live a long ways away unless you're making, you're getting a good salary. And by good salary, like well over six figures in that regard. So I just thought it was interesting that I haven't heard anything from DCYF and, we can always reach out again. This story is developing because we've just to tease for the viewers, we've gotten more information since the story came out. So there will be more phone calls and emails to different state agencies that may have known that this was going on and didn't act on the information that was provided.
What else can you share about the records that you got, TJ? Because I understand you got some more information, but you're trying to protect the identity of the whistleblower. I mean, it was Secretary Tana Senn, the secretary of the state agency, was she engaging in these text messages? We know that this Tana Senn, she's the same secretary that's kind of been under fire the last few months amid allegations of potential widespread child care subsidy fraud at the state level. She hasn't really spoken to that outside of saying that there might have been overpayments, but not technically fraud. I I mean, what is she saying in these texts in response to the allegations of theft at this juvenile rehabilitation facility?
Yeah, she met with this guy, and then they did a second meeting, and then there was, it was moving towards like a deposition or something like that where he was going to be interviewed and have people talk to him and all that kind of stuff. And that's pretty much when the text messages stopped. We're still trying to figure out what's going on with that. But yeah, trying to get an interview with Tana Senn has been proven unsuccessful so far. I mean, it's almost like she's doing the Howard Hughes thing where she's, found a spot that she's gonna hide out in, and no, nobody knows where she is, but until she decides to do a meeting over Zoom. So, my hope is that she's willing to do a sit down and talk about this stuff, because like you're saying, it's not just, rumors or allegations of theft at one youth detention facility. You also have the allegations of fraud within the child care subsidy program. And, we've been covering that as well. And then there's been, there's just been other issues that the amount of tort liability.
Lawsuits.
Yeah, the lawsuits that have been filed. And keep in mind, this is not a very old state agency. This was created in like 2017, I think. So it's not even a decade old. And yet it's been dealing with, all this liability for the state because of stuff that's been going on. And now you've got allegations of fraud. You got allegations of theft at the facility by staff members who are covering it up. So you think one would hope at some point that she's going to come out and at least discuss these things. At the very least, just say whether or not these things are going on, or that there's been some sort of investigation of some kind. But the radio silence really allows people to just make up their own minds and come to their own conclusions. And frankly, their conclusions could be totally wrong, but based on reasonable suspicion of that the silence is not for good reasons.
Yeah, in regards to the alleged theft at the Echo Glen facility, you mentioned that based on the records that you had seen, that the whistleblower might have been deposed. I mean, in instances like that, is there likely public court records or anything that we would be able to obtain that would show what was discussed during the deposition, whether or not the claims were substantiated, or what the state or whatever attorneys were involved with
Yeah.
this might have pressed them on?
I mean, that's going to be probably the next step to look into stuff. I mean, the fact that the state auditor's office hasn't done anything really, it kind of puts things in a bad position either way, because either things didn't happen or they didn't look into it, or it did happen and no action was taken. And so again, we're not talking about the youth in the facility stealing stuff. We're talking about staff committing the theft and then covering it up. So this is and then potentially you could have instances where higher ups above them were also covering it up. And then there's, potentially, God forbid somebody was telling this state auditor's office that this was going on. They're like, yeah, we're not going to do an audit. I mean, that's the problem with when there's something illegal going on, and the cover up is usually always worse than the crime itself. So that's where things are going to get a little interesting if there was in fact theft going on, because then it's a question of, well, who knew, when did they know, and what action did they take, if any?
And what was the theft? That's something that we'll need to find out as well. I mean, theft could mean a wide range of things. We could be talking about maybe there's a safe in the back room and they're taking money off the top, or we could be talking about someone in an office stealing 2,000 paper clips that cost DCYF $100. I mean, it could be a wide range of things. Do we have any sort of idea what allegations we're looking at here?
I think based on what new information I've received is that it's effectively the facility's costs. People are using it. People are spending stuff that's personal costs, and it's being passed over as costs to the facility itself. And that's the theft. It's not like it's not that they're stealing stuff in the facility. It's that they're using the facility as the basis to buy or purchase things that have nothing to do with me running the facility, but it's being passed. It's kind of like if somebody was buying something for their own personal use, and they wrote it off as a work expense, right?
Like going to my employer and taking someone else's lunch out of the fridge, or taking all the toilet paper and taking it home to save you a few bucks.
Well, or imagine somebody going on a road trip of 1,000 miles and then telling the IRS that it was a work-related trip when it was, you were going around chasing after some rock band's tour or something like that. I mean, that's the kind of fraud. And granted, that in that case you're committing tax fraud, but I'm just thinking more of you're spending money, like, or you're using, government funds to fill up your own gas tank, or something like that. That's the kind of theft that is being allegedly has been going on.
Well, TJ, this is something that we'll be sure to stay on top of as you receive more records. Really interested to see what was said in that deposition, and whether or not Secretary Senn and DCYF will respond to these allegations. But I appreciate you covering this as always. And for anyone hoping to read TJ's stories, you can catch them at thecentersquare.com. Otherwise, thank you for joining us for another episode of Washington in Focus.
Now, next in today's episode of Washington in Focus, we have state agencies that are notoriously slow in responding to public records requests. And of course, that's something we in the media do quite often to kind of find out how negotiations went behind the scene, who was influencing who, what quid pro quo there might have been in some cases. We have some agencies that are actually improving over the last several years. And the Washington Coalition for Open Government has come out this week with a new list. They call it their winners and sinners list. So you can imagine if you're a winning agency, you're responding relatively quickly to those public records requests. If you're on the sinners list, maybe you're slow walking release of those documents. So here's part of my conversation this week with George Erb, who's the secretary for the Washington Coalition for Open Government.
There's a state legislative committee that's been compiling this data complete years since 2018. So we've got 7 years of data, and one of the metric points is the average number of days it takes an agency to complete public records requests. So we thought at WashCog, wouldn't it be a great idea to come up and find out what the average is for 5 years and find out which agencies are doing a good job of turning around records requests and which ones are not. And so we took this legislative committee's data, compiled it, sorted it, ran the averages ourselves, and came up with this list, which we called winners and sinners, to recognize the agencies that are doing a good job and the agencies that are doing not so good a job. So that was the motive behind it. And that's a little bit on the methodology. On the other side of the scale, the slowest agency for the 5 years that we looked at was the Sumner School District. And they were completing their records requests in an average of 213 days. That's about 7 months it took for them to turn it around. Now, one of the things that we like to look at was there anything going on with this agency at the time that it took so long to complete the records requests? And so we looked at the Sumner School District, and during the beginning of the year of the 5-year period we were looking at, they had a terrible scandal at the high school, where the high school basketball coach was accused and I think actually put on administrative leave for allegedly committing sexual abuse with his own players. And that happened at the beginning of this 5-year period that we were looking at. So I can't look you in the eye, Carlene, and say that caused the lengthy records turnaround, but I can tell you that they occurred at the same time.
Now, the shortest average turnaround time for the second year in a row where WashCog has released this list is the North City Water District. They're in Shoreline. And get this, they're completing records requests in 0.2 days. So you might put your records request in at 8 a.m. and have it back by 10 a.m. Now, it's important to note they only get a handful of public records requests. They're a water district in a year. But still, they're responding, right away. Norcom 911, which is the 911 center up in Snohomish County, Northeast King County, and into Snohomish County, they're actually also responding back very quickly, 0.9 days. So usually getting a turnaround the very same day you put your records request in, and they get a ton of them. In fact, according to Washcog, they handled um, over 5 years, they completed their records requests, as I mentioned, in 0.9 days. But they do get a whole bunch of those. People are looking for 911 documents. They want to know what time a call was made, how fast did law enforcement or fire respond. So they get a lot of requests. They've obviously got a department dedicated to handling those requests, and they're doing a good job. Worse, as you heard George say in that clip, it was the Sumner School District, and he said it corresponded to the same time where they were, in the middle of a major controversy involving that boys basketball coach who ultimately was convicted last year in 2025 and sent to prison. So it's going to be interesting to see if there's a correlation between the response times for 2025, which we don't have completely yet, for the Sumner School District. But to take 7 months to respond to requests for documents seems like an inordinately lengthy amount of time. Another slowpoke was the Evergreen State College, the public university outside of Olympia. They completed records requests in an average of 142.9 days. Here again is George Erb with Washcog.
It's pretty disappointing, right? It's pretty disappointing. And in terms of the reasons why, it's hard to tell. I mean, it could be reluctance to release the information. It could also be, and this is not unusual, that the Public Records Office is just understaffed. They just don't have very many people working on it. And so when they get a large volume of records requests, suddenly they're underwater, and it takes them a while to work their way out. Or they could have poor processes. Maybe their records are poorly organized, and it takes the people who are there a long time to find them. I don't know. We would have to look deeper into that to find out just exactly what was going on.
I should note, when it comes to lawmakers, this really is not a partisan issue. When it comes to transparency, accountability, access to records, a lot of state lawmakers, both Republicans and Democrats, cite legislative privilege in saying, we don't have to tell you who influenced us on a particular piece of legislation. We don't have to release email exchanges we might have had with lobbying groups or others interested in pushing legislation one way or the other. Now, Washcog has for years asked all lawmakers in Washington state, to sign a pledge that they won't invoke legislative privilege. But at last check, there were only about 9 Washington lawmakers, some Democrats, some Republicans, that had signed onto that pledge that they would not invoke legislative privilege. And finally, in today's episode, I want to show you some comments this week from a member of the Seattle City Council, who I think now is the third council member, according to my Seattle colleague, Randy Diamond, who wrote this article this week, the third to come out and say, turn the cameras back on, Mayor Katie Wilson. These are the flock cameras and the other cameras that are all over the city. She doesn't want those on, citing concerns for law enforcement. ICE don't want immigrations and customs enforcement, tracking down people having access to those cameras. But this council member says, we need those cameras on because we're about to have the eyes of the world here with the World Cup. And there could be, potential security concerns.
I don't think that our city is as ready as it could be to host the world for such a global event of this scale. The good news is that the solution is simple, and there's a quick fix available. This council has previously authorized and funded the expansion of critical security cameras in key areas throughout the city, including in my own council district, the Stadium District, SoDo, where the actual matches for FIFA World Cup will be played. We know there's a distributed model and fans are going to gather throughout the city and throughout the region. The actual games themselves, the largest congregation of people, are going to take place right in the stadium district. So this council has previously authorized that and funded that. And I'm proud that we also baked in the best in the nation guardrails and robust privacy controls to prevent misuse and prevent data from falling into the hands of the federal government for immigration purposes. So today, I'm calling on Mayor Wilson to turn on the Soto cameras ahead of World Cup.
And so that's a wrap on today's episode and this week's episodes of Washington in Focus Daily for this Friday, May the 29th. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll tune in again next week. In the meantime, check out our Center Square Washington page for these stories and more. Have a great weekend.